You say, quote, on screen, if Trump wanted to have a signature legislative achievement in his pocket in the first 100-day mark, he certainly did not act like it. But it is precisely in the legislative area that the 100-day mark is such an unrealistic measure. Congress acts on its own schedule, and boy, do they ever.
It certainly does. You know, back in October, in the last weeks of the campaign, Trump went to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and issued what he called his contract with the American voter. It was just a single page of paper. The front page listed a bunch of promises of things he would do on his own executive authority as president. The back page listed things he would introduce, bills he would introduce into Congress. And basically, the bottom line is he's done well on the front page of the contract. He has done a lot of the things that he promised, like appointing a Supreme Court judge, like getting out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, like cutting regulation. He's done a lot of the things that he promised he could do on his executive power. Congress, it ain't happening.
Its own schedule, as you write. Yep. But Trump hasn't ignored 100 days. For him to suggest that he has at any point would be inaccurate. He's talked about it a lot. I think the question here is relativity. You know, how do we look at the first 3 months of a new administration? And it really started with FDR in March of 1933, and Chris Wallace was on with Karl Rove on Sunday and had this following exchange, which I think is very telling, Byron. Listen here.
This is a completely phony measure. It's derived from Franklin Delano Roosevelt's. Right. He was inaugurated 6 weeks later on March 4th. He had 60 members of the Senate, 35 Republicans versus them. He had 322 Democrats to 109 Republicans, and the country was in the middle of a depression. And
I want to point out, you did not know I was going to ask that question.
Yeah, well, look, it is not. This is completely phony.
There's the brain again, okay? He's making the case that the standard is whack, is it?
We have to remember here, Trump has majorities, Republican majorities in the House and the Senate, but they are not dominant majorities. And what Carl was saying is that in the New Deal, just as in the Great Society years in the 1960s, you had Democratic presidents with huge filibuster-proof majorities in the Senate. That is not the case here. And the other thing, though, is we should be fair here. Trump has not even introduced a number of the bills that he said in the contract that he would introduce. So he's clearly focused on executive authority, and he's taken a shot, so far failed, at repealing and replacing Obamacare. He's going to be talking about tax reform this week, release some sort of guidelines or something on tax reform. My guess is by the end of the week, by Saturday, the 100th day, he'll be able to say, I'm making progress on those two most important legislative proposals that I made. But the bottom line is success on executive action, not a success on legislative.
Let me squeeze in